Hey everyone. What we're talking about today is the general drift of Utah media and how it has gone further left over time and how you can kind of see this if you know what to look for. Welcome to the Stevenson Show. What's up, y'all? You can follow me on Twitter at RealTStevenson or as well on Instagram with that same handle. You can also follow the show on YouTube, Spotify, or Apple Podcasts. You can hit the subscribe button. And then for more national coverage, because I do a lot of work for the Post Millennial, they're a really good outlet. Go check out thepostmillennial.com and see what we have over there. What I wanted to talk about was the bias specifically of KSL News or KSL News Radio. And a lot of you will say that KSL, it's owned by the church. Is the church going woke? The church isn't going woke. I'll just assure you of that right now. The church is not embracing left wing ideology. Just like any organization and anything like this, there's nuance to this. I know sources who have worked at KSL who have spoken to me and also know people that still work at KSL. The general feeling is that everyone there is generally center left or left wing. And there might be some centrists, but they're few and far between. That being said, the church does not play a heavy hand on KSL. Generally speaking, the church doesn't really get involved. And I think that's important, but they will just send over like a press release about different topics having to do with the church. KSL on itself is just owned by Deseret Digital Media, which is owned by Deseret Management Company, and that's a for-profit arm of the church. Now, KSL, they've kind of drifted more to the left, and you can see this with more recent events, we should say. It's been happening for a while, but people haven't been noticing it as much as now. But I'll just show you two instances in the last couple weeks that have brought this to the forefront of a lot of stuff in Utah politics. The first one is a post that was obviously partisan. And this was posted on KSL's Facebook page. Now, you have to remember something in media. These posts don't just go out with one intern in the back room for the most part. These have to be vetted. They have to go past others who look at the post, say, okay, that's probably good. Let's put it out. And generally speaking, you don't put anything out on, say, a news outlet that hasn't been looked at by another person. That being said, this is what KSL News Radio, one of the arms of KSL, said in a Facebook post. Utah's Republican Party has been running into tough times. Are you tired of the Republican Party's antics? Now, this was left up for about 10 or so hours, 8 hours or so. And it very explicitly is a partisan post because you can say that the Republican Party has antics, quote unquote, going on. But if you're a news outlet, you actually have to provide evidence or different reporting to justify saying, quote unquote, antics of the Republican Party. So Trent Staggs, the Republican candidate, he was endorsed by Trump. He put this out the other day and said, hey, what are you guys doing? You can't be an activist if you're a journalist. One of the big problems in journalism is that only about 3 to 5% of journalists in the US are more conservative or identify as a Republican. The rest are more liberal, independent, or far left, you should say. So Staggs posted this. I saw this when I was driving back from a jiu-jitsu lesson that day. And I said, well, I'm going to share this. So I posted this online and then called KSL. And I appeared on Ward Radio to talk about this just a few days ago. And I'll play this clip here of me explaining why this all went down and kind of how it happened.
This morning, we did not live up to that standard, meaning our standard of political neutrality. In our treatment of the story, we take our journalistic standards seriously and we're handling the matter internally. So that's all the information they gave about what went wrong and what they were doing about it. But they acknowledged the problem and they deleted the post. And actually, Tommy maybe wasn't explicitly involved with this happening, but he sort of took a part in this story a little bit.
I have some insight into this because I called KSL when I saw this. I think Stags had posted it first, and I was just driving back from a jujitsu class, and I saw it in my car when I got back home, and I said, "Hey, well, I'm gonna call KSL and just see what's up with this." And they did. On at least, I don't remember what her name was, but she was trying to justify this on the call. And she talked about how they wanted to get reactions out of their audience with this type of post. And then I said, so would you do this with the Democrat side?
Yeah. You got to call out Kamala Harris on Juneteenth just to see if the Democrat Party gets angry or something? Like, what?
But she said, she kept continuing saying, but they didn't have a convention and they didn't have a debate this week, it was like the week of the debate when this was posted. And I said, okay, so how do you define the antics of the Republican Party? And she basically said to me that it was the rule change in the debate of the different Republicans in the primary, which basically muted the moderators. And I was saying that's how you're defining antics for this post. So that's what the conversation was like. And I posted that, and then, or I hung up the phone because she forwarded me to her supervisor. I got a voicemail, and then a few minutes later, then they put up the statement and changed it. So that's how that all went down. They did put up an apology post, and this is what I posted this later, and the full apology reads, KSL News Radio has long maintained a stance of political neutrality. As our guidelines state, the more emotional, divisive, and partisan an issue becomes, the more we present it factually as journalism rather than persuasively as opinion. This morning, we did not live up to that standard in our treatment of a story about political fundraising and the Republican Party in Utah. We take our journalistic standards seriously, and we are handling this matter internally. So I just have one question for KSL. Who actually vetted this post? Like, I know someone probably wrote it. Who was the editor that allowed this to go out? Because that's who's in charge. I mean, if I am editing an article, because I edit stuff over at the Post Millennial. If I'm editing a post or an article and someone puts their opinion straight in it, or if they put a rhetorical question, that automatically gets deleted. Because yes, the Post Millennial is a more conservative outlet, but we still can't put opinions in news reports. That's just not how it goes. And so this was a very obvious political post. And it wasn't a report, it was just them trying to get a rise out of their audience. And KSL knows this, like whoever posted this knows this. And this is just the first example that I was talking about. So the second instance that I wanted to address is, if you haven't seen it, I mean, right now my report on this is going viral online because Senator Lee quote tweeted this and made a video about how KSL covered this story and pretty harshly criticized them. This was about the shooting of Gail and Joseph Bailey by their son, who identifies as a woman, Mia Bailey, or Colin Bailey. Basically what happened is this guy who identifies as a woman, he went to his parents' house, shot them in cold blood down in St. George, Utah. A manhunt commenced right afterwards. This was on June 18th, Tuesday evening. And when there was a shelter-in-place order and when there was a press release put out by the St. George Police Department, the Washington City Police Department did a much better job with this. But the St. George Police Department, the shelter-in-place stuff, they identified Colin Bailey as a woman. They didn't say anything indicative that he was actually a guy. And if you can, I can read the Washington City Police Department did a good job with this. They released that at like 11:50 p.m. on Tuesday evening, and very clearly stated that this was a guy who was transitioning to a woman or identifying as a woman. He's not actually going to be a woman. But then the next morning, earlier or later on Wednesday morning, this is what happened. The St. George Police Department, they also released a statement, and this is what it read. Alert those living in Bloomington Hills and Fort Pierce area. A suspect of a double homicide that occurred in Washington City on 6/18/24 was last seen in the area of Quarry Ridge and River Road. The suspect was seen heading west through the wash. The suspect is considered armed and dangerous. She was last seen wearing blue skinny jeans, light blue, white t-shirt, and has dark hair. She is 5'10", 130 pounds. We ask those in the affected area shelter in place and call police if you see anything suspicious. Thank you. Media contact Washington City Police Department. That was the St. George Police media release. And they had the media contact as the Washington City Police Department. Washington City, they did a pretty good job of releasing all identifying photos that Bailey had. This was a Facebook photo that he obviously has makeup and a wig on. This is him. You can't really see the full thing. If I scroll up to the top, it's more of like a feminine cut, but it's shorter, and he's very obviously a guy in that photo. And it looks much more like the photo of him getting arrested than the one with the wig and the long hair with the makeup. Washington City Police Department did a good job on this. The St. George Police Department had no indicator whatsoever that this was a guy or a girl, except for using she, her pronouns. And that's all it took, really, because then KSL News Radio and KSL, they were culprits alongside with this as well. They weren't innocent in this. They tried to keep portraying the headline as well as the picture of Bailey being a woman. They said police look for a woman suspected in double homicide in St. George and released the one photo of Bailey, which was the most recent one, when he was seen with kind of a shorter haircut and the light blue t-shirt. But then they started to change their headlines, because what happens in media is that you will, if you're doing a developing story, you'll write a headline, you'll write the story, you'll release it, and that headline usually becomes the URL. That's kind of how you can tell how this process goes. But then as you change the headline, as the story develops, that headline doesn't necessarily match the URL because the URL stays the same. And this one, in this case, indicated that their first headline said that this was a woman, and that cached link on Google that I had, it said that KSL News Radio was reporting that they were looking for just a woman, not a man, not a woman who is transgender, just a woman. Then they started changing the headlines, and they changed this to just say suspect in their headlines. And then they used this photo of him wearing longer hair and makeup as the only photo in their what is the linked photo, which if you take a link and post it on, say, social media, the photo that shows up is the larger photo at the top of a web page versus, say, something in the middle. KSL News Radio purposefully put this one where he looks more like a woman with the makeup and the wig, and used that as their key link photo, and then put the mugshot with the shorter hair where he looks a lot more like a man down in the body of the article. That's how they operated with this. And as they changed the headline to suspect, then they changed in the body of the article that, oh, this was actually a transgender woman. But up top, if you were just scrolling online, if you just saw this on Twitter, because plenty of people don't read articles. And news media, they know that. So they chose to just put suspect and have a picture of him looking much more like a woman because they had access to these photos off the bat. It's not like they only had access to this one Facebook photo of him with the wig and the makeup. They had access to all of these. And they also had access to the one with him in shorter hair, which they knew looked much more like the most recent photo that was taken of him when he was on the porch I think he was on the porch of his parents' house or something. KSL essentially just made it seem like this was a woman. So did the St. George Police Department. And people down in southern Utah were legitimately confused as to who they were supposed to be looking for. And that's a problem. That's a really big problem, KSL. It's a really big problem, St. George Police Department. You can't just misidentify and mislead people when there's a murderer on the loose. And then it was even richer. There was a segment from KSL News 5, like the TV portion of KSL, where the police were saying, we're going to give her as much respect as she needs. That's what the police officers were saying in this. And they had apparently negotiated with this guy who was standing over by some bushes for by a fence for hours and hours. And then afterwards, like the segment here, I want to pull this up. This is the clip that I want you guys to see. Just remember that at this point, this outlet has reported that Colin, quote unquote, Mia Bailey, had said that he would do it again. Like he would shoot his parents again and that he hated them. I would do it again. I hate them. That was the quote. He also tried to shoot his brother in cold blood. He then, as he was walking back upstairs after he shot his parents and went down to the basement trying to shoot his brother, he saw his mom making noises and then shot her again, shot his dad again in the head. That is the attitude and the malevolence in this guy's mind. To say that you now have sympathy for this guy when he shot both his parents and you can tell that he has evil in his heart, shooting them again, having no remorse, trying to shoot his brother, apathetic about doing so. I think it was that he basically didn't care if it had hit his brother or not. That is someone who has evil and malevolent intentions. See what KSL says and just see the tone, because what you have to understand something with media. Usually when you're doing interviews, you get a bunch of stuff and then you pick out what you want to present. And pay attention to what KSL is presenting. They present an interview with a police officer who is very sympathetic to Bailey. They then also present other aspects that kind of show more quote unquote sympathy. So just watch and also listen to the tone of this guy who's speaking, reading the transcript. It bleeds just sympathy, be sympathetic to this poor transgender woman who just murdered his parents.
Police say 28-year-old Mia Bailey was hiding in the bushes off 28th East and 10th South. Bailey is suspected of shooting and killing 2 people in a Washington City home last night, and it took a negotiations team to get Bailey to give up.
This isn't the end for her, right? We want to make sure that she knows that and that we're going to treat her the correct way and in a fair way. Make sure, our justice system is followed and that she gets the respect that she needs.
Neighbors say the 2 people killed were Bailey's parents and that there were issues between the parents and Bailey about Bailey's transition from a man to a woman.
There was already volatility and bad vibes going within the family.
Police are still investigating the exact.
So you get the sense that KSL is just trying to present a sympathetic story about this poor transgender woman who you have to say she, you have to say her, you have to respect her and what she wants. Police and the outlet, or at least that police officer, they're trying to paint that picture because they're saying that there were issues between the parents and Bailey. Guess what? The parents were both registered Democrats. They likely had sympathy for Bailey. Also, police knew at this point, it was about a year prior, his brother got a restraining order placed against him for himself, his wife, and his kids. Do you really think that this was just someone who was mentally fine, that he was just doing okay, that he had no evil intentions whatsoever? He just got so frustrated about his parents not accepting him for who he is. No, I can guarantee you that's not the story here. I can guarantee that this guy had malintent for his whole family. That is the kind of guy that KSL is having sympathy for in this report. That is Colin Bailey. So I hope KSL is very proud of how they handled this and how they reported on it, and the narrative of, oh, just have sympathy for this poor woman, even though, yes, it's a man, he's mentally disturbed, he murdered both his parents. That doesn't spell, oh, we should give him sympathy. Watch them put this guy in a women's prison and then see what happens. So there's plenty of other examples besides this Mia Bailey story, as well as the KSL Republicans antics post. And there's a whole treasure trove, but I just put together a short list. This isn't exhaustive by any means, but you can obviously see that KSL has shifted to the left, or is biased to the left when it's supposed to be politically neutral. I'll pop these up on here for those who can't see. This is a post from KSL News Radio. There's multiple facets of KSL. There's KSL.com, there's KSL News Radio, and then also the live broadcasting section of KSL. This KSL News Radio tweet, the headline for the article basically labeled Michael Knowles far right, and the tweet read, far-right political commentator Michael Knowles spoke at the University of Utah's College of Social Work on Monday evening. This was back in April. And if you can't see this post that KSL News Radio had got over 480,000 views. Main reason is that this article essentially labeled him far right and then cited other articles which had defamed Knowles. And I replied to this about this specifically, and this was a Rolling Stone link that you can see in the article. And Rolling Stone had published an out of context clip basically saying that Michael Knowles called for the eradication of transgender people, when in reality he was talking about transgender ideology or transgenderism. And Knowles called them out. He said that it was libelous and demanded a retraction. They ended up changing the headline because it would have been libelous and it would have qualified for a defamation lawsuit. That's why they changed the headline. It wasn't because of anything else. So there was that one. KSL News Radio, they changed the headline to not include far right. It said Michael Knowles' speech at University of Utah draws protesters. That was the edit that they made. And then on the editor's notes, it said this story has been edited from its original version to include additional context and reaction and to refine word choice. So when the liberal bias leaks out, they had to correct it because Michael Knowles posted about this, Mike Lee posted about this, and this got a lot of attention from the usual supposedly politically neutral KSL. So on to the next one. Next example. This is a post from KSL.com, a news article. The tweet, it was longer than the headline, but you can kind of tell what when news outlets post more than just their headline with their tweets. If they're including more information, you can kind of gain some insight into where their biases lay. And this one says Senator Mike Lee is sponsoring a proposal to require proof of citizenship to vote in the U.S. through undocumented immigrants that are already barred from voting in federal elections. Now, you might say to yourself, oh, KSL, or KSL is pointing out that Mike Lee is making some bill, if you just read that straight, that doesn't do anything, even though the bill itself is requiring proof of citizenship, because many states that have these laws, I mean, it's federally illegal to vote in elections that are at the federal level as an illegal immigrant or as a non-citizen. But many of the states that handle elections have these election laws. They don't require you to have voter ID. They don't require you to give proof of citizenship. They just require you to say and sign on a line that says, hey, yeah, I'm a US citizen. And plenty of people are able to do that. And there's been evidence, many reports that have come out in the last week or so, showing actually that there's been policies at DMVs where if immigrants or illegal immigrants will go to DMVs for welfare benefits, many of them are required to hand out voting registrations to those that apply for welfare benefits as well as driver's license. So there you have it. Next one. This is that there was no evidence of furries in Nebo School District despite allegations and social media firestorm. This one also got a lot of views, over 900,000. This was because KSL's coverage of this was abysmal. If you look at the article itself, the headline that there are no furries in Nebo School District despite allegations, this was all based on a statement from the middle school. They didn't do an investigation. They didn't look into it. If you're more liberal, if you're on the more liberal side of things, you tend to just believe what the statement of the school would be, because if you were more conservative, you might have more of a concern about this. And it said allegations of students at Mount Nebo Junior High School dressing up like animals and biting, barking, and pouncing on fellow students created a social media firestorm on Wednesday. This was back on April 18th. As it turns out, these allegations were completely unfounded, said Seth Sorensen, spokesman for Nebo School District. And that's the whole article. They just quote this spokesman guy, and they didn't do an investigation whatsoever. And it's an easy, you can easily debunk this if you just type in Nebo furries on Twitter, and there are videos and photographs of kids dressing up in animal masks, like this one shared by Liz TikTok. And I did my own investigation into this. There were multiple instances of evidence with kids wearing masks, acting like animals. I also got this video. This was coverage from Eric Mutzos. He did a lot of investigative work on this as well.
Bully.
He said this and then
so
showed
the kids stayed to
video.
themselves. So what about the video I just got from a concerned parent where this girl acting like a dog is going after these students?
So there's that. There were multiple different examples of kids acting like animals in this. I saw a Facebook post even, and it was from a substitute teacher who said that there were kids meowing in her class. She commented underneath an article that had been posted about this. I messaged her while I was doing my report for this article, and she didn't respond back. But within the next hour, she went and edited to change her comment to say that there was no behavior like this after that, even though with evidence collected by different parents and groups, there were kids dressing up as, you could call it furries, you can call it animals, what have you. They're not in complete furry costumes, but yeah, there were kids with animal face masks dressing up like animals, as well as acting like animals in classes and in different instances. But KSL, they say no evidence. There's no evidence because the school district said there's no evidence. So we have to believe the school district. Do another one. This was kind of an infamous post. This was Lehigh man arrested accused of sexually assaulting 11-year-old he met on the internet. Now you read that, you see the article from KSL, says Lehigh man, Lehigh city in Utah. 26-year-old Lehigh man has been arrested in Provo for investigation of a rape of a child after police say he went to the house of an 11-year-old he met on the internet. Now, if you actually read up on what other details were shared about this in different coverage, Eric, he did a really good job on this once again, kind of collected these. But the Daily Wire exposed that this was an illegal immigrant who had raped an 11-year-old. And there's many articles like this from KSL. I've seen several. There was one where there was a guy convicted of murder, and in previous reporting, the murder had taken place at a home that was connected to the Mexican cartel. Yet there was no mention of his immigration status. And if you look on his arrest record, he was from Ecuador or Honduras or something, and he was a citizen of there. So he was obviously a foreign national. If he was an illegal immigrant or not, that's up to question because they still haven't gotten back on my grammar request of the Salt Lake City Police Department. Complaint hotline for DEI law, already receiving false complaints. So it's the stories that they choose to highlight that are political in nature that show the liberal bias coming from KSL. Anger, this was hilarious. Anger over transgender bathroom bill continues to hang over Utah legislature. Now, the only reason you choose this photo for an article like this, and for those who can't see, this is in front of the Utah legislature, in front of the Utah Capitol building. It is a picture of a toilet that they wrote, those who are transgender activists, they wrote on it, "Zero discrimination." And then the caption underneath is, "A toilet was placed on the stairs of the Capitol by members of the Utah Students Unite during Zero Discrimination Day in Salt Lake City on Friday. Members of the LGBTQ community were invited to flush their tears, or not tears, flush their fears away by writing messages on the toilet." That type of imagery, caption, it's obvious that whoever was writing this was in favor of those who are transgender activists. But essentially, that's just kind of a short list of all the articles that I just kind of saw just in the past few months. And there's plenty more. Like, I know that KSL tried to lay into Senator Mike Lee when he was running in the midterms in 2022 against Evan McMullin. They were basically cheering for McMullin to win the Senate race. He didn't end up winning. They tried to present the lead that Mike Lee had over McMullin wasn't as large as it turned out to be, based on McMullin's his own campaigns polling. And there's just so many instances of this with KSL. And I've talked to people. It's not that I just see these articles and that I can observe this. I know people who have worked at KSL who are conservative, and the general feeling is that it's a left-wing outlet. And it makes sense because they have to syndicate articles from places like the AP, from NPR. KSL is a news source that has syndicated coverage, so they'll take different articles from the AP, from the New York Times, and then share them with their own audience. And usually when you do that, you have to keep a certain standard of editorial discretion with these different political topics. I don't see how KSL can turn around from this unless they really clean house. The liberal bias has gone into KSL as a news organization. This is the same thing that I saw at BYU when myself and Luke Hansen, we made the Cougar Chronicle in opposition to the Daily Universe, because the Daily Universe, it is also an outlet that syndicates different news networks like the AP. And whenever you look at their political articles, there's not that many on the Daily Universe, but they're almost always framed in a liberal perspective. Like I saw one the other day that they chose to run, and it was about the Trump trial, and there was no mention of several different factors. No matter what you think of Trump with different affairs or what have you, the charges that were brought in that case brought by Alvin Bragg were very convoluted as well as shaky, to say the least. And they didn't even add the fact that Biden's second in command guy at the DOJ, uh, Matthew Colangelo, he went to Bragg's office after Bragg had dropped that case against Trump, basically. And after Colangelo went to Bragg's office, got a job over there after being in Biden's DOJ as the second highest person in the DOJ, then they started up the investigation again and ultimately convicted Trump. So there you have it. And KSL is just another symptom of this. And I believe this is that this has to do a lot with Utah culture, Utah niceness culture, I'll say. And it's because we want to play nice to just get along. And to a certain degree, that's necessary. And a lot of what is masquerading as disagreeing better in Utah or being nice is just caving on principle. That's why the police in St. George put people's lives at risk when they didn't want to share information about Colin Bailey, who now goes by Mia, that he was a man, that he's not a woman. And that's why KSL doesn't want to document things about Bailey, doesn't want to document things about DEI, doesn't want to document things about illegal immigration, and didn't want to actually investigate the Nebo Middle School situation. That's all a symptom of left wing bias, and it needs to stop. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. You can find me on Twitter at Realty Stevenson. Don't forget to like, share the show. And until next time, thanks so much.